Okay, so another story. Share a story from just kind of along those same lines of the physical manifestation of something that's very spiritual. This is when we lived in the tribe. We lived in with the Palawano. We were at our house, and there was a tribal. Their houses were all made from bamboo, and there was a house about 50, 75 feet away from us. It was a big house, and they had a big family gathering, a bunch of people. And we had had dinner. I'd read stories to the kids, actually just to our daughter. It's just Abby with us, right? Read a story to her before going to bed, and we're getting ready to go to bed, and we start hearing all this shouting coming from the house, just 50, 75 feet away. And we went over, and I went over to the window, and I looked, and I saw people. They'd opened the windows in the house, and were jumping out the windows, and ran out their door, and jumping off the porch, and they all just booking it over to our house. And they're saying, Ogsa, let us in. Ogsa means cousin. That's what they called me. Ogsa, let us in. He's going to kill us all. It's like, what? Okay, so we're like, okay, come in. So we open the door. 35 people with their children come into our house and are sitting, and it's not a big house. It's because it's also kind of made of bamboo, and they're all sitting in our house, and they're huddling on the floor, scared, and sort of thinking, we don't have a bathroom big enough for all these people. And we're like, what's going on? And there was a young man I knew, his name was Utung. He's one of my language helpers. He had, when he was in there, and this was actually an ailment that they had from time to time in the tribal area, is they had a sickness that would come on him. And it would cause when the sickness came on him, his eyes would roll back into the back of his head. Take care. His eyes would roll back into the back of his head, and the first thing he'd do is he would start reaching out and grabbing at children. If there was a child nearby, he would try and grab the child and pull them in to eat them. That's the word they use. He's going to eat us. He's going to eat our children. But I don't know if he's going to bite him or what would happen. And it would take 10 people to jump on him and hold him down. And in that incident, so all the women and the children left, and all the men stayed in, and they jumped on him and held him down. And he'd fight with them. They'd hold him down. And finally, at some point, he jumped out of the house and ran off into the jungle. And they were afraid they weren't going to see him again because he's part of their family. And I told him next day he came back, and I told him if it ever happens again, come get me. About a month later, it happened again in another house. They came over to our place, and they said, come look. And so I went out there. I went to the place where it was. Same thing was happening. All the women and children had left. It always happened at a family gathering. And all the women and children had left. And all the men were in there. And the spirit would come on him, and it would be an episode that would last about 15, 20 minutes. And then he'd fall back into kind of normal state. And so while I was in there, he was just sitting there. And all of a sudden, they saw his eyes rolled back, and he started to grab. So everyone jumped on him, and they're all yelling things and calling out. They're not Christian. I went to put my hand up on his forehead. First they told me, don't touch him, he'll bite your hand. It's like, okay, wait. Then when I had an opportunity, I put my hand on his forehead, and his forehead was so hot, it almost burned my hand. It felt that hot. It hurt to put my hand on his forehead. It's like, this is crazy. What is this? And in that whole thing, we thought he had cerebral malaria or something like that. We gave him medicine. They got through that incident. We gave him medicine the next day, and he had this continuous problem for several years after that. And from latest that I've heard is he's doing okay now. He has heard the message of the gospel that freed him from some of these things. We weren't there when the final kind of freedom thing for him, liberation, came out. But the thing that that was just another thing that really helped me to understand how connected the spiritual world and the physical world are, that we tend not to get. We tend to separate them in our Western context. And it brings me back, and I guess this would probably also be a good point too. The biblical idea of what the spirit world is that God created the spirits. He created the spiritual world. He created it like an angelic order. The angelic beings of higher levels, and then mid levels and lower levels. And and when he created these beings, there came a point in time, or at first, he put them in charge of his creation, in charge of the earth, and he said, "Hey, let's make human beings in our image," because his angelic order was just spiritual beings. So this is his spirit family, and he says, "Let's make people in our image." We have a physical world now, so they're not just going to be spirits; they're going to be physical creatures that also have a spirit, and we're going to make them in our image so that they'll reflect who I am. And then he gave his spirit family a kind of charge over the people. But they rebelled. Now there's 3 calamities in the Bible, in the Jewish mindset in the early days. There's the first rebellion in Genesis chapter 3, where people ate the fruit that God told them not to eat, the forbidden fruit. And the serpent was there in the garden. The serpent was a manifestation of one of these spirit beings. Eve said, on the day that he said to Eve, "Did God really say that you should not eat from any tree in the garden?" And Eve said, "We can eat from the trees in the garden, just not the tree in the middle of the garden." And God said, "We cannot eat it or even touch it, or we'll die." And the serpent said, "Oh, you're not going to die. God told you that because he knows that when you eat from that tree, you'll be like him. And you'll know good and evil." And so you remember the rest of the story. She took from the fruit of the tree. And that's what brought sin. That's what brought sickness. That's what brought corruption. That's what brought decay into the physical world, is that act. The second great calamity was in many generations past that. Some of these angelic beings, this is written about in Genesis chapter 6, and it's also in the book of Enoch. They said, "We want to go down and produce our own physical creatures. We're going to go down. There are these women. They're beautiful. We'll make them our wives, and we'll produce offspring." And so they did what was forbidden. God had forbidden from them to do this, but they took on a physical manifestation, and they produced offspring, and they were called the Nephilim. You read about the creatures in other ancient texts when you read stories about Cyclops, Minotaurs, giants, Hercules, all kinds of different things. The other offsprings. When you read about in the other ancient texts, they talk about these offsprings of the gods that are corrupted and things like this. That's the connection between that and the biblical connection. The third great calamity is in Psalm 82, Deuteronomy chapter 32, and Genesis chapter 6. In Psalm 82, God chastised. He takes his divine counsel, the sons of God, that he has given charge over human affairs, and says, "You've brought all this injustice and evil and wickedness on the earth, and because of this, you're going to be judged, and you're going to die just like the men, just like the human beings that are down on earth. Someday you're going to die, and you're going to face that same punishment." Deuteronomy 32, it says that he divided the nations according to the number of the sons of God. And in Genesis chapter 10, it's the Tower of Babel. That's the Tower of Babel story, where God divided the nations and scattered them throughout all the earth and confused their languages. And so this is where we get in the ancient cultures. You get all the different gods of all the different other ancient cultures, whether it's the the Greek gods, Zeus and Poseidon and Athena and Apollo and all those, their pantheon of gods, or the Norse gods of Odin and Loki and Thor and all those guys, or the other manifestations. There's the ancient Chinese gods, or like the Palawano. Their god's name was Umpu. They had Umpu, and I think that another one of them was named Asak. And all these different manifestations of these different spiritual beings that traditionally were their gods. But then God told his divine council, when this event happened, he said, I'm going to separate my own people. I'm going to make, and you all, he gave them charge over the nations. You all have charge over all these other nations, and I'm going to make my own people. They're going to be mine. And the way you're going to know that they're my people is there's going to be this one man who's too old to have children, and his wife who's too old to have children, and they're going to have a child. And it's going to be a miracle. And that's written about in the Bible from Genesis 11:12 on. That's the story of Abraham and his wife Sarah, and the miraculous birth of Isaac, the child of promise, which then carried on and formed the Jewish nation. Which then ultimately the Jewish nation had its own set of problems. They rebelled against God as well. God became a man, sent Jesus down into that nation. So in this manifestation of how God did these things, there's this ongoing tension between the rebellious sons of God, the fallen sons of God, the ones that have turned their backs away from God, to turn our hearts away from God. We understand, this book is like one of the most ancient texts that we have. These are ancient writings. It's amazing. These are ancient writings, but we can still read them, and very, very well read. So this this tension that goes on all the time in all different cultures everywhere is the tension between that original rebellion, the serpent who told Eve, "You shall not surely die," said, basically God lied. He's telling people that today, that God lied, you shall not surely die, and we have the answers. And it's trying to communicate that they have the answers instead of God's answers. I got one more story to tell. That's not a story that happened to me, but it's someone that we met. There's a guy whose name was Shoefoot, and he was a Yanomami shaman down in Venezuela. The Yanomami tribe is one of the most violent tribes. And there's a book you can actually get. There's a book about this. It's called Spirit of the Rainforest. Written by, it's narrated by one of the jungle shamans in the book, whose name is Jungle Man. The editor, kind of the guy who compiled all the story, is a commodities trader. But in this story, there's this guy named Shoefoot. And I tell this story because we actually met Shoefoot when we were in missionary training. He came and spoke to us at one of our training schools. And he couldn't speak English. He could speak his Yanomami language and a little bit of Spanish, and so it had to be interpreted. And as he came and spoke to us, he told the story of how he became a follower of Christ. And you have to understand, the Yanomami were one of the most spiritually attuned people. Not only mixed in with, they use a lot of hallucinogenic drugs. I don't know if it's ayahuasca or something else. In their language, it's called ebini. It's something that's a powder that they stick in a bamboo tube that they blow up people's nose. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, it's these are the Arola roots, and they blow it up the nose. It's a DMT.
Oh, okay.
MAOI inhibitor, and it's very painful.
Okay, yeah, that's what it says in the book, is that they'd blow in their nose and they'd roll back and then kind of writhe in pain, but then as they did it, then they'd enter the spirit world and they'd see the spirits coming to them. And so Shoefoot was a rising shaman. Jungle Man was his cousin. When Shoefoot was hearing the stories about Jesus from the mission. And the story was this: God, the Creator God, became Yanomami and came and walked the trail of Earth. In Yanomami belief, God, they knew that God was up there in the seven. They called him up there in the heavens. They called him something like Yawana Nai Laba or something like that. I don't know the language, so I'm butchering it really badly. But it was considered a very noisy place and a very hot place. And the name of God meant the one who eats our baby's children. Because every time a child or a baby would die in the tribe and the shaman would take the Ibini and enter the spirit world, he would get on his eagle spirit and try and ride an angelic spirit from that area would come down and take the soul of the child and take it up into that place. And they would try and fly after it and grab the soul of the child and bring it back to the child's body. And if they were successful in doing that, the child would live. If they were unsuccessful, the child would die. And they had been told by their spirits that God up in the heavens the reason why they would take the soul of the child up there was because God would eat those babies. And so they were told that was his food. So Shufut, but they didn't ever know that. It was only what their spirits had told them. They learned later that was the lie. That wasn't what God was. But anyway, so Shufut had been hearing the stories of Jesus where they said God became a man and then he walked our trail and and then he was killed, but he rose from the dead. And every time, both he and the other shamans, when they'd hear that story, they'd go back to their hammocks and their spirits would come and talk to them. They said they would crowd into them and say, please don't listen to that. Please don't listen to that story. Don't listen to that. They said they couldn't understand why their spirits were so afraid of that story. That story in particular terrified their spirits. Well, Shufut was this rising star in the shamanic world among the Yanomami. And one night he was in his hammock and he said that Omawa himself, Omawa was the name of their chief spirit that had taught them all the warfare, all the drug use, all the things that they did to continue to fight each other and kill each other all the time. And he was kind of their chief spirit. Omawa himself came and grabbed him out of his hammock and yanked him out and dragged him out into the jungle and put him next to a tree and tied him up with a vine. And this is his story, the way he told it to us. And tied him up with a vine and then danced before him. And he felt cold. And as he was dancing, the vine was squeezing him. And the word that he said that the vine was using, or the squeeze that he was feeling, was the same word that they use when they see an anaconda squeezing the life out of its prey. He felt like the life was being squeezed out of him. But this creature, this incredible creature full of light, was dancing before him. And he said he was beautiful. He was amazing. And it was clearly Omawa's attempt to say, be part of what I want to do here. I'll make you powerful. I'll make you the most powerful shaman. All those things that you think that an evil spirit tempts us with. And as he danced before him, but he's feeling the life being squeezed out of him. And he had heard the stories of Jesus, and then he cried out, "Jesus, come and save me!" And all of a sudden, the tension in the vines was released. Boom. And he felt a sense of warmth and an impossibly greater light than the light that was dancing before him shone. And he heard a voice that said, "He's mine, be gone." And this incredibly powerful creature, he said, just got away as fast as it possibly could. He said it looked like the way they described when enemy raiders would come into a village and the scared dogs would run off into the jungle, just terrified out of their minds. That's what this creature looked like. And from then on, he belonged to Jesus. He would travel around to Yanomami villages, and other shamans would look at him and they'd say, "You died and come back to life. Why do you say that?" He said, "Because your shibono," this is in their chest, "your shibono is empty." The shibono is where they would feel where the spirits, when they were shamans, would come and inhabit them. They said, "We've only seen an empty shibono on a shaman that has died." We've never seen an empty Shibono and a shaman that's alive. Your Shibono is empty, so you must have died and come back to life. What's it like? What's it like when you're dead? He said, I'm here, I'm very much alive. And of course, we understand what ultimately happened. The gospel penetrated that culture and has had a powerful impact. There's greater forces that have fought very hard to make that culture go back to the way it was. And it's very interesting because this experience that we have had living overseas, understanding the shamans, like the shaman that told us that how he fought, that the young man I told you about that had been that had the spirit come on him and tried to eat the children. A shaman in the village, a good friend of mine, he told me how he had one night fought with that spirit. He had taken out his machete and he had chopped at him, and he had chased him off on his horse. And I said, "You don't have a horse? There aren't any horses around here." He said, "Yes, I do. It's a spirit horse." And I rode after him on my spirit horse, and I chased him away. And tell about these battles they're having in the spirit world. The spirit world wants greatly for all of us to think that they're in charge and that God is not in charge. And a lot of the things that you see, the things they teach at some of the workshops here about shamanic lore and shamanism is not what real shamanism is, from my experience. That the real shamanism is fighting, like where we lived, was fighting the evil spirits, or some of those guys, they would use their shamanic practices to curse their enemies. Or in the Yanomami, the shamans would contact the spirit world and call on these spirits. These are the fallen sons of God. These are the fallen angels that intended to deceive us and draw us away and do just like the serpent said to Eve and say, "You'll not surely die. We know what's really what the truth is. Listen to us." That's the way this is. Yeah. Yes. Hello.
I don't know how many people feel like how far away from the concept of supernatural, but a really approachable, organic way I've heard it said was when you think about Tibetan culture, they have pretas. Pretas are these tiny ghosts, and they feed off of addictions, and they feed off of emotions and desires. And there's also an idea of tulpas, and a tulpa is a thought form that is thought about so much. If you think that might not be real, like Nike, Just Do It, like their tulpas become very powerful. A lot of corporate entities are attached to a tulpa, which starts off as an idea. So I don't know how much creation of these entities we take part in, but I know that they absolutely require some level of our participation. And in places like this, they say, the jinn live in these empty places where, when you said the little people name,
yeah,
I jumped out of my seat, it's because,
we don't say that.
We just don't even use their name because stuff would disappear.
Oh, really?
And it could be encouraged by certain activities. And I didn't really want to get anywhere towards soba, but it was like that obvious, that getting inhabited.
What were the first? You said tulpas, and what was the other one?
Pretas. So
pretas?
Yeah, pretas are these, they call them tiny ghosts. They're always hungry, and they're hungry for lots of.
They're like spiritual insects.
Yeah, they're like a interdimensional tick.
Okay.
That, when we think of spirit world, we tend to think of like magic and like just, and it, from what I've seen, like some of the technology we have, that's where it comes from. Like,
wow.
I think we went from like landlines to cell phones and black.
And that's so interesting because if you read through the Book of Enoch, Book of Enoch goes into a lot more about this, but it talks about how there's a little.
Things that angels did when they came.
Yeah.
They dug up. Certain ones dug up the veins of metal. Other ones.
Yeah, and they taught human beings these arts, the art of war and metallurgy and all kinds of.
Taught the women the makeup.
Yes.
You know, an interesting thing about Azazel, because this came up just a couple of weeks before coming out here. Azazel is actually the original name for the desolate place that the ancient Hebrews would send the scapegoat. So every year on Yom Kippur, ancient Israelites, they weren't so focused on a sort of personal spiritual salvation. It was more a corporate or communal salvation. And so what they would do that as a community is Yom Kippur, one of the most important days of the year, is they would sacrifice a sort of flawless lamb, and that gets a lot of attention. But what doesn't get a lot of attention is the scapegoat. And this was a goat that they would ritually take all the sins of everybody in the community, they would strap it to this goat, and they would kick the goat out of the city into the wilderness, the idea being it's somebody else's problem now. Our sins, our mess-ups, it's not our fault, it's out there now, and we can start fresh. Well, the place where the goat would be sent out was called Azazel, who later became known as the Watcher, who came and taught technology. And you read the list of things that Azazel brought to humans. It was taught them how to make weapons, how to make shields, how to make armor, and how taught the women jewelry and beauty and makeup. And they list one material that Azazel used, and it's antimony. And antimony, so they list all these things that Azazel came and taught everybody. And they don't name like, and jewelry was made of gold, and makeup was made of whatever, and swords were made of steel. The only material is called antimony, which also happens to be an extremely rare, extremely important mineral that right now, you know anything that's going on down in Venezuela, down in Brazil, the whole U.S., doing their thing down there, it just happens to be that where they're sending the warships, where they're sending the thing, it's huge antimony deposits. And another very interesting place that antimony is found is in Black Rock Desert.
Yeah.
So Azazel, being the place in the wilderness where the scapegoat is sent to bring away the sins of the community, Azazel being the Watcher who brought, basically you can just say technology to humans, has this connection with the material. The only material listed is antimony, which also happens to be found in deposits right in this valley and also mixed in with the playa. And so, the discussion about is the supernatural, the Western mind, we think of supernatural, we think a ghost is a wisp, or an invisible thing, something that can move through, you can't touch it. Same with demons generally. You think of a sort of mean-looking ghost imp or something that is only occasionally can materially affect the world. But we see from the very beginning that this idea, this Western idea, seems to be a complete deception that has almost no backing in ancient scriptures of any tradition, that the supernatural world is separate from the physical world. And in fact, one of the earliest heresies that was identified by the Christian Church was Gnosticism. Now, Gnosticism, if you're familiar with all sorts of occult things, has gotten lots of attention in the 20th century until today. Sigil magic is Crowley, it's all revolves around Gnosticism, this original heresy of the Christian Church. Well, one of the primary reasons why the Gnostics were kicked out of Christianity was their obsession with the idea that the material world and the supernatural world were two totally separate things, and that the material world, the very atoms that make up materia, are evil. That is impure. It's bad. Everything is made of some sort of, basically evil substance.
Sin.
Yeah. Whereas the supernatural world is pure good. And so in in ancient Gnosticism, this idea of separating yourself from materia and entering the supernatural world was this sort of highest goal that you could possibly attain. But you go into scriptures of all sorts of, ancient traditions or religions, the supernatural and the material are one and the same. This idea that they're somehow separate. I mean, as far as our human minds are concerned, categorizing those, it helps us to categorize and think of like demons, angels, ghosts, they're over there, people, dogs, and cats, they're over here. But really, it's just a function of kind of iconography that helps, that separates these in our mind. And so you talk about ghosts, you talk about demons, you talk about, I'm pretty sure none of you would be here unless you had had some experience with something you could not explain. And it's unfortunate as Westerners, which I think most of us here are, that our first experiences with the supernatural, we are already programmed, told, and deceived to be under the impression that that is separate from our physical world. Mm-hmm. I think it's, we can talk about them separately, and I'm not trying to say we need to change our language or anything, but once you sort of come to this knowing, to harken back to the Gnostics, once you really gnosis the fact that we've been deceived, everything makes more sense. And the ancient stories, such as the Watchers, Azazel coming down, inhabiting a place, being this place, thought forms, spirits taking different forms, not just of like a physical thing or a invisible thing, but also ideas or of words or of symbols or sigils. And I love you brought up like Nike and corporate logos, because really all that is sigil magic. Thanks, Alistair. Like we're ruled, this world, everything that we would consider materialistic or materia, talk about corporations, talk about finance, talk about whatever, this sort of thing that we want to separate ourselves from because it's pure evil. These types of things are primarily spiritual, even though they are right in front of us and we depend on them to live, and we consider them to be whatever right in front of us. They are primarily spiritual, yet we experience them physically. And it's the same thing for us as human beings. We are primarily spiritual, but also physical. And when you notice just how close and blurry that line is between both, you start to realize, there really is no effective functional separation between what we consider material and what we consider spiritual. And you can then understand that everything you do, everything you say, everything you touch, every person you meet, that is a spiritual act. And not only does it affect your current circumstances, but it affects what you would consider the spiritual circumstances around you. And there's a lot of power that comes in that. Even just for, understanding what you're doing when you buy a Coca-Cola or something.
Does everybody here know what the Re-enchantment book is?
Yeah. The which book?
So
say it again?
For anybody that doesn't know,
Dementia?
Re-enchantment book came out of a medical anomaly, a man talking in his sleep in the 30s.
Okay.
These doctors wrote down what he said over years, and it appeared to be Melchizedekian and Enochian angelic hierarchies describing a book in 3 parts. Very simply, it's the heavenly order in one, very dry and bureaucratic and boring, but if you get through it, it's believable that there is quite a dense heavenly governing body. The other part they get into is Jesus' life, and it doesn't seem to be anything that denies any divinity there, but it's a very interesting perspective. But out of the Re-enchantment book, they describe that 33 million they refer to Satania as the solar system of rebellion where we are. That's what they refer to in the book. They say that there's 33 million living amongst us, fallen angels. And these are people that are genetically compatible and live for a lot longer. And
they say they're fallen angels that manifest physically living among.
We might know and see a lot of them, and we might see them as different people that come and go in society. Have you ever heard of
What?
Yeah, I just lost my train of thought. No, that's it. But so the Euphrates River is about to dry up. It dried up, and
Right.
The wacky Christian religion I was raised in. If it was anything close to right, my dad. The worst thing about my dad telling me all this was not that it was crazy and nuts, was that it ended up being right, at least to me. So when I saw them slow down, going door to door, change their style of ministry after 60 years or whatever, and this place dried up. It's supposed to be a third of the world is supposed to die from these angels loosed out. So I think that in the days in the end, it's like the days of Noah. We wouldn't be able to deny it. It'd be undeniable. And we're starting to see very miraculous say I can change genes in my body horizontally with no background and access to the neurological prosthesis of the internet. So it's really easy to get lost in the sauce.
Yeah. Actually, it's interesting because a few things. Number one, on the playa here, I've described it as a combination of mystical and the material, spiritual and secular. It's all combined here, totally. But we had a supernatural. I believe we've had a supernatural encounter this morning. Okay, what happened to the three of us? The odds, mathematically, are completely impossible.
Well, I was thinking, before I was hoping to find something.
But within that minute, it was just
it didn't happen fast.
it was.
We're talking seconds.
Yeah, it was just about before I was.
It was 2 minutes. You just showed me the video of you. We're walking, and it's oof, there he is.
So what happened this morning is, I went to the bathroom, like all people should after they wake up, and I come back, and I'm just about to duck into my tent, and we're talking seconds here, and these two people are standing in the street, right here, 30, 40 feet away, staring at me. You were. And I'm looking at you guys, and I'm not thinking anything of it, and then you're still staring at me, and I'm like, okay. And then there he goes, Carl. What?
That's awesome.
So they're watching. I'm a writer, and I was interviewed weeks and weeks and weeks before about Burning Man on a program that dropped just a week ago, I think. Yeah. And these two people were watching that interview. Were you walking down the street when you were watching it?
I was watching it a second or third time, because I wanted to talk to him about it, but if I am not careful, he's real smart, so he might not say a lot, but he's smarter than it. So I didn't want to sound silly or stupid. So I was hoping to get my hands on the book, then talk to him about it. Now I lost the book.
So here you are. Here you are in a city of 65,000 people with a 9-mile perimeter. You can be camping anywhere. It turns out you're just literally a stone's throw. You're watching a video that I happen to be on. You see my face on that video, and in a split second before I duck in to get coffee, because coffee's a sign God loves us. And all of a sudden I've got two people looking at me. The odds are literally impossible.
Well, except if I hadn't asked.
Exactly.
I prayed and asked.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was all within 2 minutes.
There you go.
So uncanny.
That's so cool.
Sometimes she'll stop me and be like, hold up.
Okay.
That's-
You're looking now at...
How much do you believe potentially that the Holy Spirit is a connection to a plane or a spiritual plane or like an ethereal plane or place where these things may or may not live, feel, physically, this stuff? You know what I mean?
I guess the thought that does bring me back to one thing that our understanding of the spirit world. And C.S. Lewis even wrote something about that. One of the problems with the spirit world is we can get too interested in it. I had an experience that the Lord gave me when I was a very new believer. And it kind of has taught me, at least where I believe He wants me to go, with understanding the details of it. Because the spirit world, there's things we can guess about it based on things that we have that are written. We don't have a lot of certainty about these things. The experience that I had was, I was a new believer and I was at summer camp. It was a secular camp, not a Christian camp. And our counselor, who was not a Christian, told us, I know a meditation technique to have an out-of-body experience. And he told us how to do it. And so another buddy of mine, he said, okay, George, tonight you meditate, I'll meditate, and I'll meet you right here in the middle of the cabin, and then we'll wander around camp together, And so that night, I did this as a new believer. I'd been a born-again Christian for a little over a year. I did this meditation technique, and all of a sudden, boom, I sat up. And I looked back, could see my body behind me. Got down out of my bunk, walked around. My buddy didn't show up; he's snoring, And so I went outside. I wandered around camp, and I started to fly. And I flew around, and I flew like all over the place. And then at some point in the whole thing, I kind of I don't remember what else happened. I think I dozed off or something, and I woke up the next morning. And I was like, that was the most wild, tripping thing that ever happened. I knew nothing about psychedelic drugs. So, didn't need to take psychedelic drugs to get that. I was like, I'm going to do this again tonight. So that night, I started to meditate again and do it again. And all of a sudden, I felt this really, really strong presence from the Holy Spirit saying, no.
Me too.
That's not for you.
A few weeks ago.
Yeah.
She sat up and said, like, hey, I think something's trying to get into you while we're doing this.
With the Monroe tapes, are you familiar?
I'm not familiar with that,
Yes.
no.
Right.
Amazing, right? And probably utility, but probably somebody like me has I probably shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Jenna, probably a different scenario.
I mean, I love it.
Certainly.
I love astral projecting. But there's been times where he's sat up straight. He sleeps. He's an odd sleeper. But I swear this one time he sat up. It's the middle of the night and he's just up.
Scenario.
And I'm looking at him and he just starts to speak this like angry Italian kind of sort of, but like it was dark and he just had this really sinister look. And I mean, I love horror movies. It's like, but this was too close. I was just like, no. And you did eventually wake up, but it was like there's something. Oh my God! It was so
an
odd.
absolute element to
So I said you need to protect
keeping the
yourself.
vessel on
You
guard.
dying to comment?
Yeah, you were talking earlier about maybe some of the tribal people that do ayahuasca and other versions of DMT and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been my research that when those tribes get into that, they wait till like a time of passing, like an 8 or a 13 years old, like other religions. And if that experience happens once, they do it because they believe that it opens that gate. It like teaches your brain how to do these things. And then once you've done it one time, your body can repeat it.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
I would say with almost any compound, personally. One time, one experience, and your mind can take you back
Take
to
you
where
back.
you were.
Interesting.
without any help.
What the Yanomami said about that, like they wrote in the book, it talks about that. Sometimes some of them become very, very spiritually attuned after doing it, and then the other ones they regularly continue to take the ayahuasca. Had two interesting things happen with their tribe. One was there was after they became Christians, there was one of the missionary school teachers from where the missionary kids were, going to school in the city, came out to visit, the jungle ministry, and came out to visit the church. And 3 of the tribal elders who had been shamans, who were now Christians, were sitting there, and they wouldn't talk to him. And so the missionary went and asked him, said, "Why won't you talk to him?" And they said, "He's not a Christian. He's not a believer." We were like, "What?" And they said, "No, he has the spirit of Hawashi." Hawashi was the name of a monkey that had a perverted spirit that would always, a lot of sexual perversion. And he said, no, that can't be him. He's just like us. And they're like, nope. His spirit doesn't click with us. He has Hawashi. And it came out 2 months later that this particular missionary school teacher was sexually abusing children in the MK school. And so that was one thing that happened. And they had this insight, this recognition, without having to take, because they didn't take the drugs anymore after they became Christians, that they had that. The other one was an interesting thing. There was another one of the shamans who was friends with Jungle Man, or actually he was the enemy of Jungle Man, but he eventually they became friends, and he also knew Shufu. He became a believer, but he lived in a more remote area of the jungle, and the gospel hadn't. He became a believer when he came to visit where the gospel had gone, and he went back to his people, and he didn't have the Bible, he didn't have the word in his language, and he didn't have encouragement, but he had become a believer in Christ. But then he kind of got discouraged. As those of us who are Christians, that can happen to us, right? So he tried to take the Ibini again, and he would take the Ibini and enter into the spirit world. The spirits weren't there. He'd wander around, he'd look around, nobody, nothing. They never came back to him. And so he started pretending. He would tell, because people were like, they needed help with sickness. So he admitted later, when he finally was able to work through this difficulty, he admitted later that he would tell his people that he made stuff up. He would tell them that he had seen a spirit when he hadn't, and that a spirit, and it was all based on stuff that he had done in the past. But it made me think, and something that you might, when you meet people who are doing ayahuasca or whatever, and they're hoping to contact luminous beings, like some of the gurus that are out here at camps here will tell you, they've contacted these entities or luminous beings. And you meet other people that say, oh, I want to meet luminous beings. And they take it and they're like, I can't. There's nothing there. I enter the spirit world. Or like when I was wandering around in my astral projection out of body, there weren't any other people or spirits or anything. That once you have been sealed with the Holy Spirit, once you're marked as belonging to God, those other entities can't come get you. They can scare you, they can do everything, but they can't touch you in that realm.
A lot of experience with epigenetics and journeys and whatnot. About somebody always says that. They're like, oh, I want to try that. I'd like to talk to God and sort some things out. It's like the first thing I always try to say to them is like, you can decide to go to church, but you don't get to pick what the discussion is going to be about.
Yeah.
When you get there, there's no knowing, if it's Boy Scouts today or if we're going to do a sermon on something you weren't ready for. And usually it's something you needed more than you thought you were going for.
At least expected.
Yeah.
I saw crazy practicality in these things lowering down, they were dark, shadowy things. They were lowering down these ropes and dropping these things that, if you were like a lobster and saw a lobster trap, you wouldn't say, oh, that's a lobster trap.
Right.
You might think it's, like a Swiss watch could be, mistaken for being alive, if you didn't know, like, how ornate the gears are. And I was watching this thing come in and out of my living room, and it was dropping this thing. And I mean, I could be said to be like, in a psychosis, but they were humming this 4-note tune I could play on a piano, and at the end of it was these star-shaped things, and they were dropping it on the girl I was sleeping next to. And they looked like little starfish, and they weren't alive, and they looked like they came back and harvested them. Like, it looked like they were using these, like, technological things I could barely understand, but they were triangular, and they could, like, spread by bumping into them. And it was so crazy, because I remember I started praying for the first time in many years, and it, like, got mad and started pulling up this rope. And I thought it was pretty weird, but a girl we call Sarah that talks to angels, because that's how we refer to her. She walks in and she says, what are those triangular dark things in the ceiling that are lowering that down?
Wow.
And it was so bizarre, because, it was like, and it was, for certain, like a very mundane task. This thing had to, like, lower down, pull it back up.
Similar to the hand.
Yeah.
I was just
Everything's got a
exact
Wow.
thought. Yep.
And there may be malice in some places, and there may not be, but there's definitely some element of, I believe, accessing that world illegally. For me, I feel like Iboga could probably probably solve some addiction issues. There seems to be pharmacological evidence of. Do I think I would like to be with ayahuasca? I mean, the entities don't. They seem very similar to the things we're warned about. You know, we use peyote, and we just began to use microdoses of it. And I can't say I could justify eating a large amount of being inebriated. I don't think it's a good function of it. But something happened to us spiritually when we began to eat very small microdoses of peyote, and out of desperation, really. I mean, I've always grown it. I've always had it around. I thought it was magical because there seemed to be this connection to indigenous people with connecting to Yeshua through this plant. I thought it was what an odd thing to say. Like we talk to Jesus through this plant, the way people talk about Jesus. I didn't really vibe with it, but we just kept slipping up too much. And Janice said, "I think we have the answer here, and we should try it." And it was something that isn't getting you high in any real way.
Not at all. It's very, very, very functional.
I wouldn't be able to deal with it.
Like, in fact, on the playa, I can speak from experience. A chip just it gives you this energy to keep pushing forward.
And it's so funny. Like, I've offered it to people. Like, I used it as a
it's
supplement.
unexplainable.
And people are like, "Oh my god, I'm not ready for that." I'm like,
"Yeah," because they think, "Oh my god, it's peyote."
It's not going to make you hallucinate because it's a microdose.
Yeah. Right.
I mean,
and it just
Has anybody seen the documentary DMT, the Spirit Molecule?
Dr. Rick
To present that these molecules actually connect to other things. Right? So you and I could have DMT experiences. We can literally talk to the same spirit about the same conversation, come back here and have a third conversation about that conversation.
Wow.
It's that connected.
They have people on continuous drips mapping that realm. And
there's an ecosystem.
What is crazy is that over the course of multiple different studies with this drip process, the map is the same. The entities are all the same. So in that realm, they exist. And
That's
they're
very
mapping.
Wow.
I ask myself if that means I should go in there. I don't think so. I think some of them are just not that.
You first.
My dealings with spirits, ghosts, are ones are people that have been killed in that area and they haven't left. Okay? Stuff that. And none of them were mean. Oh, one lady was mean. But Timothy, I worked at Columbia State Historical Park in California. It's a gold town. It's got a good balance of ghosts in almost every other building out there. But my job was a maintenance person. And I fixed whatever got broken. But I had to keep it at the 1812 specs. Now, 1870 specs. There was one young man named Timothy. We figured he had to be about 7. Him and his brother were both killed in the fire there in Columbia during the gold rush days. But Tim was here. His brother Johnny was at the other end of town. But Johnny can leave that and come visit him. Because people that are sleeping in that hotel will hear a ball bouncing. They open up the hallway and look down. There's a ball on the floor, but there's nobody around playing with it. Then there's the major. The major and I had a little run-in because his chair, somebody broke his chair on the arm, so I had to take it back down to the registration area where we fixed the furniture. You wouldn't believe the shop that they have there to fix old chairs, couches, and such. So I had to take it over there. I left it, and I got a call. Hey, this chair's ready. Come get it. Oh, okay. But I was busy with other things because the maids are running behind. All the rooms are filled, and they're going to be refilled that afternoon, so they wanted some help. So in the Columbia, I go into the closet, and the door, you can pull it and jam it up against the wall. Old buildings, they're kind of warped. So you jam that door up there. So I'm pulling sheets off for them, and the door decides it's not going to stay open. it's going to smash. But I have a trash can there at the door jamb. Came back, smashed it again. Came back and stayed. And I went, all right, who did I tick off? What happened? My radio crackles. Tony, you got to go get Major's chair.
Wow.
And I said, oh, okay. So just took the sheets, ran over, dropped them on the beds that the mates are going to be fixing. Went over, grabbed his chair, took it upstairs into his room. His room. We rarely rented out that suite. But if people really wanted it, they were going to have to deal with him. So, dropped it. I grabbed his pillow, ran downstairs, ran it through the dryer a little bit, came back up, put it back in his chair. I think that was in the Fallon. So I went back to the Columbia and went back up to continue helping with the girls. And I was approaching the linen closet. The door opened. Was that a thank you?
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, that was absolutely.
Yeah. Timmy, the little boy, is a prankster. I'm in room 7. It's got 2 queen-size beds and a day bed. So they can put 5 people in there pretty easy. So I went in, I'm stripping the beds off, and I'm taking all the pillows, and I'm stacking them in the middle bed. That way the girls will have an easy time getting to them. So, stacked it, stripped, went to the linen closet, got all the linen that they needed to redo that room, came back in, pillows are gone. All right, who moved the pillows? So there's this big, and it's just a big table, Colombian big table, and all the pillows were stacked underneath against the back wall. I had to tell Timmy, I don't have time for this. Those are 2 of the things that happened to me out there. So
That's fascinating.
you got your spirits that are pretty heavy duty.
Do you think those are the real people?
Yeah, because it's not my history. That's history that's been going over and over and over since the Gold Rush days.
That's interesting. My wife and I, we were married we were married in 89, so this probably happened in 91, 92, 93, somewhere in that range before we had kids. We had owned one of the oldest homes in our town. We walked into our house, and our rocking chair was rocking in our house. And we both stopped, and we're looking at it, and we don't have a cat, we don't have an animal in the house, there's nothing. It's just dead air, dead space. My rocking chair is rocking. Like full on rocking. And so Leanna and myself were like, oh, you weren't scared, but we both went, we don't know what this entity is. It's an entity. This isn't wispy, it's an entity. And so, yeah.
To be fair, sometimes there's a matrix of time that's hard for us to imagine.
Yeah.
We think of it going this way.
That's right.
And all the things that have happened can sometimes be perceived in a house like we live in, where we know that people worked and lived very happily at a farm for hundreds of years. And then if we came in there like we did, and I brought some substance in, all of a sudden this stuff starts happening, and is it those spirits that are unhappy? I think it's more of a disruption in the ecosystem. And as much as I'm starting to feel that the dead are dead.
But why haven't some of these ghosts move on?
Why?
Trying to hear what you have
Why
to
are they
say.
stuck here?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was in San Francisco in 2017 for the Psychedelic Science Conference, and I was staying with a friend, and the plan was to go to LA for a couple of days, but I missed my bus, so I had to take one of the evenings so I had a day to go. Someone at the conference had gifted me mescaline, which is essentially, the way I describe it is like a gentler form of LSD. I think it's described like peyote. So I took it, and pretty soon, these 2 entities appeared to me. They're about 4 feet tall, and they had the voice of little children. They're very soft, like very meek, and they had I couldn't see their faces. They had gelatinous helmets, like jellyfish, and electricity was running all through it, and they had tentacles waving around, and electricity would jump from one tentacle to the other, and they were like maybe 6 feet away, and I'd reach out to touch them, and they would cower back, and I couldn't see their mouth, but I could hear them. They could talk to me, and since that point, I could communicate with them, and it was they never talked to me. It was only when I reached out to them. And then pretty soon after that, I got the ability to talk to dead people. And the way it would work is I would put my hand on the grave or like some marker that someone had died, and that person, and that they talked to a Spanish woman. She actually yelled at me. She's like, "Get off my land! I don't like you." I got lost one time in the woods, and it got dark, and I didn't know the area. And then there was a memorial for like a bench of the person who I guess like visited that park, or his family set up, and I asked, and he was like, "Okay. You're going to go this way, you're going to go that way, you're going to go that way." And he let me out. I saw a makeshift grave of this woman at the park, and I talked to her, and I was like, "How did you die?" And she's like, "I jumped off the bridge this summer to kill myself because I hated my dad." And I didn't have my phone with me. I googled her name when I got home, and it was a news article about how she jumped off the bridge this summer to kill herself, and her stepdad was interviewed. He's like, "I have no idea what happened. She seems fine." Anyways, so that was, I got the ability to talk to dead people in 2017. I didn't use it often, only when I really needed to, or I was kind of curious, or I had time to kill. But it was their voices. It was like a Spanish woman, like a guy, a young girl. Like it was their voices. I became a Christian in March 2022. Within, I want to say like a minute, like very soon after, those voices became. Have you guys seen like horror movies? You know the like stereotypical like demons like ah, blah, blah, blah. That, and they became super loud. They were furious. They were so mad. They were like almost screeching. It was this like unbridled rage. And they're like, "You should kill yourself. You're worthless. I hate you." They were mad. They were so mad. It was really annoying. Like I couldn't concentrate because they were just yelling. And that was March 2022. And I found out when I would either read or hear the Bible, they would start screeching in pain. Like it was uncontrollable. And when I go to church, they would start screeching. Like when I was fellowshipping with other believers, I actually had to leave a couple of times, like take a break, because I couldn't concentrate because they're so mad. And what's also interesting is secular music. A lot of them, they would gorge themselves on it. They would just like, I could feel them like getting stronger. It was just like, wow. And like the more sacrilegious music, they would like I used to listen to a lot of Jake Mcnaughton. Very talented, but anyways, they would just like build themselves on it. And it took about, the way I describe it is like starving old, is it took about like 6 months of just like being in the Word of God, fellowshipping, and they got like weaker and weaker and weaker. They would try things like they would give me sleep paralysis, I couldn't move. And actually, the first time I got it, I was reading the night before how sleep paralysis is demonic, and I couldn't move. I couldn't even open my eyes, and it would be right there, like whispering to me, just like, kill yourself, I hate you. The only way to get rid of it is I'd have to pray to Jesus in my mind, because I couldn't move my mouth. It took about 6 months of like detoxing essentially. And then, since then, that was like 3 years ago, they haven't showed up. And I share that to say, like, because I've wondered about that too. And I think there's spirits that have always been here, entities that imitate dead people. They literally change the voices. They do facts about these dead people that I would have never known. But because like, they're like they're in the spirit, they have a lot more access to information than like we know. And so they're very good, because the Bible says Satan masquerades as an angel of light. And so they're pretending to be dead people in order to deceive us.
Well, there's history with the children being in the schools. There's history of the major, after he was done with the war, he was retiring there in Colombia. So there's history behind these people that were basically hanging around.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that is such an interesting question. And, you know, all my sort of woo-woo friends, there's a lot of, spirit guide kind of stuff and talking to spirits and this sort of thing. And really the only question I ever have is, how can you trust that? How can you trust this? Like, if one believes in the supernatural realm where there are conscious, individuated entities who have their own motivations, their own minds, their own sets of knowledge, their own, weaknesses and strengths. I mean, right here, I could tell any of you anything, and I could repeat history that you might know, or whatever, and you have no reason not to trust me necessarily. You probably would more or less believe what I have to say, and you might even, trust me with stories of your own. But you really, I could be making it up. I could have my own motivations. I could be trying to con everybody into buying my book on ghosts or, things like this. And so when people have a lot of contact with the spirit realm, which I have had myself, if we're working with this assumption that they are like people in that they are persons and everything that goes along with a person, to say, I met a spirit, but he was a good spirit because he said good things to me, and so that's how I know. And so he's a good guy. But I met this bad spirit. He was being very mean, so he's a bad guy.
Are you saying how would you know?
But there's no way to know.
I think so. I think there is.
How would you say?
I think you could discern. I had this thing talking to me, and it was telling me that I must not do these things and be around these people, or it would affect the rest of my life. And I asked for an angel, and it kept saying it wasn't an angel. And it said that it was able to move very small spaces, and it really couldn't do much, but like within fractions of an inch. And how I could know I could trust it was, as I started to say, like Jehovah or El Yahweh, it's sung in Hebrew, which, the Day of Atonement, it's supposed to be a holy name. There's lots of other ones going down the Sephiroth in the Kabbalistic that hold enough power. And it was crazy because as I said that name, it rang like a bell. And of course I didn't listen to it. And, lots of terrible things happened in my life. And I still, struggle with, like, was that real? Or was it not? But I think that just that part of the name, the testimony name, in Hebrew, in that name, there's mother, father, daughter, son. There's, so many things that are almost intangible. And we don't even know, that are missing an ancient vowel. And, I'm sure that Golden Dawn people that practice some of these Hebrew chants may not be using the divine name for good purposes.
Yeah.
So I just know, like, a spirit of discernment, you can pray for it. And I know that when I pray for help, or I ask Jenna, ask to get to know God or get to know herself with spirituality. She didn't say, hey, I just asked. I could feel it, though. And I could feel the resistance. So, I could have just known.
I think just one little bit of guideline that I use is the Spirit of God is always pushing us toward love, toward His goodness and righteousness and holiness. And what God wants to drive us to is a connection with Him, a closeness with Him, dependence on Him, and love, and forgiveness, and peace, and all those things. That's where the Spirit of God drives us. And to Him, God is loving Heavenly Father. That we are connected with Him as part of His family. That's where He wants to draw us. That's where it will go.
I think for me, when I listen to all of this, I keep coming back to where the Bible says that no one can come through the Father except through Jesus. Right?
Mm.
And I think sometimes we want to hold on to, in the spiritual realm, that, okay, so we believe in a spiritual realm. So we attach ourselves to an idol within the spiritual realm. And I don't think Jesus wants us to do that. I think we're warned in the Bible to not attach ourselves to things that we don't understand. In our physical world, yes, we're spiritual, but we're also physical. And because we're in this physical realm, we don't understand what we're tapping into necessarily. I mean, evil spirits will play Jesus if they have to give you a message that will bring you away from God. And I think, the fruits of the Spirit are, it edifies God. It edifies Jesus. It's not about self. It's not about, telling the future. It's not about any of that. And, I'm not knocking that a spiritual realm exists. Absolutely it does. I've had experiences myself. I've been pulled down the bed. I've had sleep paralysis. I've had an entity while I'm, waking up, when you have a little baby and you go, oh, you're so cute, and you shake their cheeks, right? You pinch their cheeks and shake. I've had an entity do that and just, shake my head back and forth.
So I've had, experiences too. My husband has seen a little demon sitting on my shoulder with his hand in my head, and he had to push it away and things like that. So absolutely, all of this exists, but I don't think that in our physical realm that we have the capability of discerning what we're actually interacting with. And I just think that we need to be very careful. We can have spirit guides, we can have friends, we can have absolutely, but the thing comes down to, do you trust it? Because if Jesus says there's no way to the Father but by him, through him, why are we seeking other things? I guess is my point.
So I have something that I would like to share as something about myself that I'm coming to a realization about, but it's something that I grew up with and didn't understand. So my mother was what is known as a mystic. She was a superpower in this world. She gave out so much energy that it ended up killing her from a very, very rapid glioblastoma. Because she put more energy into the world than was given back. But that was just my mother. Since her passing, though, there is an undoubted connection that I have with her. I can zone. Just yesterday, my friend was lost in the desert, and I needed to know that he was okay. And I was able to focus. My mother came to me and said aloud. So I knew he was okay. There's been other times when the storms are rolling in, I felt a need to get up. And my mother always had this, and I always thought she was batshit crazy. But she undoubtedly would have complete control over weather in the most miraculous ways. And like, I joke around with it with college buddies, like, it's gonna rain on our parade, and I'll be like, let me call someone as a joke. But then all of a sudden, like, wherever I was. So the other day, my mother, in that moment where I was contacting her to ask her to change the weather, she said to me, Mark, I have to stop doing this for you. It's already in you. It's been in you all along.
Already in him.
It's already in you. I can't keep doing this for you. It's already in you. And so, for the first time, I felt this energy surge through me that was definitely a connection to my mother. Because there is only one thing that I think that is singular in emotion, is that mother hug. That feeling of hugging your mother, the warmth, the love, the envelopment of connection. Like, it's so strong with my mother and I. And I think the whole time my mother was trying to teach me that that's inside of me. And when I was here and she was able to say that to me, I know that that was a direct conversation. So I'm really open to hear your interpretation of that, because I'm trying to understand it myself. And collectively what I've heard kind of goes against what I know is happening with me. And it is supernatural. So I guess what I would like to know is what your interpretation of this is.
I'll offer something to you. Okay. I'm not going to try and explain what you're feeling, what that is, or I'm not going to try and contradict what you're feeling. What I would offer to you is God is real and Jesus is real. That what he's asking is for you to press into him. Press into who God is, your connection with God as a loving Heavenly Father, and Jesus as older brother, as God in the flesh, who has done what's necessary for you to connect with him, and to press heavy and hard into that, and talk to him, ask him about it, find out what he wants, and then let him be the one to direct you as to what's going on with your mother. Let him be the one to tell you, so that you don't have to get that from anyone here that's going to come across as our opinion, but you get it from God himself, the author of truth, the one who has the greatest love, the one who has the most interest in you more than anybody or anything. That's
also the one person that my mother, or one entity my mother, always told me to connect with, and I've avoided my whole life.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's what I think God's calling is for you, is to connect with him.
Thank you.
This has been really... Hey, can I get a group picture of everybody?
Oh,
That'd be so cool.
Will you take also one with my phone?
Yeah, you bet.
Let's do this again.
Yeah.
This is great. This is like
Stop by the chat anytime. We love hanging out.